So I stumbled upon this post on Reddit that was very interesting. Let me share it with you. What keeps people in expensive cities from moving to cheaper places? To be clear, I don't want to imply that anyone is causing their own poverty by stubbornly refusing to move. I just want to understand the real reasons why people live in such expensive places. I thought about this very question a few years back, and then I did my research and recognized a few reasons why people stay in expensive cities. What are your reasons to why you think people will stay in such expensive cities? So when I was looking at this post, I decided to take a look at a few comments. Some comments were pretty funny, but some of them were very thoughtful. And I want to read some of them to you, and let's react together and see exactly what we could do to answer this question. This comment was probably my favorite one. My father was a mailman, and we talked about this once. We grew up near NYC. At some point, he had seniority and could transfer to any number of places, including somewhere in Mississippi. His salary would remain the same, and he told me, so if we moved there, we kind of live like kings. We also be living in effing Mississippi. That is extremely true. I thought about this a few times. I'm like, why people just don't end up living like in these small little states where it's extremely cheap to live in? And no offense to anyone who lives in Mississippi, but you gotta understand, this person that placed that comment is saying it from a place of, when he was living in New York. So living in New York is a completely different ballgame. Let me give you a good analogy when it comes to this. Say if someone owns an F-150, right? They love the F-150, it's their baby, they just love it. How do you think you will convince someone who owns an F-150 to buy a Prius? Mathematically, it makes sense. We know that the cost of the vehicle will be a lot cheaper. We know that the actual insurance will be a lot cheaper. The cost of gas, everything will be a lot cheaper. But no one in their right mind would downgrade from an F-150 to a Prius. Does it make sense? No. But the thing about it is this. People just enjoy certain things in their lives and they do not care how much it costs. Like living in New York as well, and I live in Jersey so I understand this, everyone complains tremendously when it's snowing, how horrible it is, how bad traffic is, how much the subways are just insane, it stinks, there's rats. Everyone complains about so many things, but there's multiple millions of people living there. But the problem is they would never, ever leave. The reason why is they get to enjoy all the things they have in the city that they can't get anywhere else. So they would never leave, but they would love to complain. And we know we all love to complain. Now let me get to my next comment. Let's see if it's gonna be funnier as this. This one comes from, I like this name, Rainy Day Seamstress. I'm not sure why she's a seamstress only on rainy days, but let's read it. Jobs, family, weather, general quality of life. There are places I refuse to move to because of political and social issues. Jobs is extremely important. There's a lot of places out here that do not have good jobs in big corporations, such as these big cities like Chicago, Atlanta, New York. We could go down to California, even some places in North Carolina. Those places have big corporate jobs. Oh yeah, Texas. Forgot about Texas. Has so many jobs out there that is worthwhile to leave wherever you're living, live in the bigger, expensive cities because you're gonna get paid more. And if you're gonna get paid more, you'll feel more safe and more secure. She also mentioned family. There's a reason why people don't leave these expensive cities. And there's a few reasons. Let me explain to you. The first one is this. Like she stated, family. Sometimes you have a good nucleus around you that can help you out with like childcare and all the necessities you need in life. It's good to have a support system like that. But this is something a lot of people do not understand. Some of these cities are very expensive. Even though you are low income, if you've been living there for such a long period of time, they cannot raise your rent up to a certain point. I'm gonna give you an example because my grandma lived in a town called Hoboken. And everyone hears about Hoboken and they see how expensive it is. But there's people in Hoboken who don't have Hoboken money, as people say. They have a very limited amount of income. But this is the beautiful thing about it as well, which allows some people who don't make as much money to live in these cities. She lived in a building, a very expensive building, and there probably was like 10 to 15 other residents just like her age and some a little younger, that were living there for nearly 30 years. So she was able to enjoy all the beautiful things about Hoboken and hardly pay anything in rent. So the reason why people don't leave those cities is because they're getting a great deal on the rent that they're paying, and that allows them to not leave and not have to worry about money. And I know you're probably thinking, well, the weather, that's horrible. The snow, the cold, all that nonsense, and you want to live in a warmer climate. That is true, but not everyone wants to do that. You see, my parents lived in Jersey for years, 30 or 40 years, sold their house, made so much money, and moved down to Florida. The reason why they moved to Florida, because they were an older state. They just wanted to retire in Florida. And that's usually the reason why people leave expensive cities, when they recognize that's it. They're tired of the grind, they're tired of the hard work, they want to go somewhere, a nicer climate, to just calm down and enjoy retirement. Rainy Day Simptress also mentioned this, and I'm not going to get into politics because I don't want to get all this hate comments on the bottom. I don't want none of that. But there's this quote that I heard that will put this thing up nice and pretty and wrap it up in a bow. Let me give you the quote. The quote comes from Corey Ellison. So this is what he says. You think people in one town over are gonna be any better? No. Human nature, it's surprisingly universal, and it's universally disappointing. My point is this: just because you have any political differences, getting up and just leaving another state for simply that reason, I mean, that's a choice of yours, but that's something I won't do. It's extremely expensive, and there's no guarantee wherever you move to, things will change for the better. People are who they are. They're just not gonna change, and they will travel everywhere. As people are learning now in places like Tennessee and Texas, they talk a lot of crap about people in California, and there's a big amount of people moving from California to all these states where it's Republican states, and they do not want any of these Californians there. But hey, it happens, and it's a thing. So trying to avoid it is impossible. Let's get on to the next comment. This one comes from My Name Is Not Molly. Well, I don't know why you would want to call her Molly, but hey, it is what it is. 47% of the working parents rely on family for the child care. I don't really know where to get the 47% from, but I kind of mentioned this before. That is extremely important. You will save so much money in childcare. For anyone out there who has childcare, you know it's extremely expensive, and not having to pay childcare and having someone watch your kids. Because listen, when I grew up, I was raised by my grandma. I understand now grandmas like in their 40s and 45s, and they do not want to watch any kids. But that was a big help back in days, and allowed my family to be able to give us the little they were able to give us, because of the fact is they weren't able to pay for childcare because they had my grandma. Now let's get on to the next comment. And this comment comes from Machiavelli himself. Moving anywhere with a low cost of living immediately means you need a car to get around. I live in a high cost of living area, but transit is one of the best in the US. I don't have money for insurance, plus gas, plus monthly note, plus maintenance, plus yearly registration. That is extremely important, because you can live in these big cities and people forget you don't need a car. I keep on bringing up New York in this example because I lived around there, and there's other places I know that have a great metro system. But New York's system is amazing. You do not need a car. You can get around with just a bus and a subway. There's some crazy people in the subway, but hey, everyone takes it. You're not alone. It is what it is. It's available, and you do not need to pay all these ridiculous fees for insurance, gas, a car, none of that. Unless you live in Jersey in the burbs, you can get a car there. But if you're living in the city, you do not need a vehicle, and that saves you so much money. I live in Florida, and when I moved down here, there is no way you could just walk. It's impossible. You need to get a car in order to get to the grocery store. Anywhere you want to go, you need a car. I'm gonna tell you right now, Florida is not a cheap state to live in. People think it is, but it's not. It's quite expensive, and I always had a belief, regardless to where you live, is gonna feel the same. The amount of money you make in New York, California, wherever you live, you normally don't get the chance to go live in a smaller town and keep that money. And if you do, really, what are you gonna do with that money in a small town that doesn't have any amenities or much things to do? So what do you guys think? You want one more comment? All right, let's go with it. But before I do that, please hit the like, subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna provide more of these videos because I find it really interesting, because the comments people put and the questions as well I see on Reddit is extremely interesting. So please hit the like, comment, subscribe, share, and let's continue to have fun and discuss this. Here's the next question. One of the biggest barriers is that moving when you live paycheck to paycheck is very difficult, especially when moving long distance. I have moved across the country 3 times. It isn't cheap. That is exactly right. Moving is not cheap. And the further you are in distance, the more expensive it's going to be. And the more junk you're hauling, the more expensive it's going to be as well. It's not a simple thing to do. If you're going to get an apartment, you got to put down rent for an apartment. You got to show proof of income. Hopefully you're continuing in a job. You're not starting a new job because then it'll be difficult. You got to put your items somewhere in a storage. There's so many things that come in play when you're moving, and it's extremely expensive. So usually people live paycheck to paycheck, don't have that flexibility to move down to a cheaper place. So they stay where they're at because it's comfortable, and unfortunately they cannot make the move until they fix their finances. You better fix your finances. You don't want to stay in a place where you cannot move simply because you live in paycheck to paycheck. You need to change that. You can't do that. Now I'm gonna end this video on something that I think is really interesting and thought-provoking, because I thought about that before, and I know people have thought about this as well, is why poor people live in certain areas. Why can't they just get up and then just leave? And let me explain to you the reasons why that's not as easy as you think. Now, growing up in certain areas, especially expensive cities, they have a community, and that community looks out for each other. Everyone knows everyone. Someone watch your kid. If your power comes off, someone will be able to give you a power. If you need some extra food, someone will help you out. It's a tight-knit community. And I know people see crime and they see all these other things, but there's still a lot of love in these communities. And what happens is people are afraid to leave that because they know once they leave, they don't have a support system anymore and they're on their own. And the more money you make, and if you buy a home, usually it comes with a lot of land, which means you're isolated. You're not usually talking to your neighbors. I don't talk much to my neighbors. You usually have an extreme distance because when you build wealth, like I said, you build bigger homes and you usually create a distance from each other. And that's the reason why they don't leave. And also, where else are you gonna go where you're paying extremely cheap rent? The rent you're paying, some people live in Section 8, some people live in other areas, in the projects, whatever it is. You're not gonna find anything as cheap as that. So unfortunately, the incentive for them to get up and leave is not there. It takes a strong person to get up, leave that environment, and take a risk in the unknown. A lot of people do not take that risk, but the people that do, they understand is brighter on the other side, and they get to reap all the rewards, which is the higher paying job for a higher skill position and getting to a place where they want to go. It's difficult because you feel like you're leaving people behind when you do that. You don't want to leave your parents behind, your friends behind, your siblings. It's a difficult decision to make, but when you make it, it works. So remember, the reason why people don't leave expensive cities, number one, is because why? If you're paying cheap rent and you're getting all these extra great amenities and you don't need transportation, why leave? Stay there, enjoy everything you have. And in reverse, why people who don't live in low-cost cities move to expensive cities? Because they are afraid to make that leap and take that risk that they're gonna lose their support. So thanks guys for watching this video. I hope you found it really, really informative. I will continue to do a next video. I'm gonna be looking around on Reddit, trying to find some good posts, and I'm gonna share with you guys so we could discuss and see what we could do to get this resolved. So if you wanna share your stories or have any tips, drop it down in the comment. I really find those extremely informative and I find it inspiring when people do great things. Take care guys, see you in the next video.